in the minivan on the way home, parents need to dial it back, not analyze the game. One of the best things you can say to your kids is, I loved watching you play.
Welcome to the Focus on the Family broadcast, helping families thrive.
Welcome to both of you to Focus on the Family.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Eva's posed the question. It's probably the first question a mom of a firstborn 10-month-old. I mean, she already got the soccer flyer. That sounds ridiculous, doesn't it?
It does sound ridiculous, and I would say what's going on in Colorado Springs if you would do that. But my first advice is teach them to walk first and then worry about it.
But this is, it is one of the things that we have to respond to as parents. You make a statement in your book which parents are going to cringe at even hearing it. I could feel it. But you actually encourage parents to not go to their kids' games. Now, that to me just goes counterintuitive. I mean, I try to make my kids' games and to build in a couple of games that you purposefully miss, and that's supposed to be healthy. Come on.
It is counterintuitive, but because the temptation for a lot of parents is to make it about them, that frees up their child to have their own experience of sports. It lets a child know that the life of the whole family is important and doesn't revolve just around them. So I'm going to be at most of my kids' games, and when I can't be there, I'm not going to beat myself up.
Now, you also said, though, there's a little coaching, not to use that pun, but you tell your kids you're going to miss a couple of games, and you prepare them emotionally, because they're probably hearing from their friends that their mom and dad comes to everything. They're super parents.
Yeah, it's what every parent wants to hear, right? Especially in Olympic season, Mom, you were always there for me. But again, it's about, I think, the function of the whole family. And one of my children cares, one of my children doesn't. And so we really want parents also to check in with your kids and find out what's important to them.
I would say the real reason that I suggest that you do that is simply to show yourself that you can live without seeing the game.
It's a good thing.
Really, it is, because it is so easy for the parent to become the parent's event and not theirs. So for you to know that you can go and not go to a game and that person still be okay is fine. I'm very concerned about the dependent relationship that comes on performance. Yeah. So Mike Matheny, the coach of the St. Louis Cardinals, has also demonstrated that even sitting there saying, come on, let's go, you can do it, could to some children put an amount of pressure on that doesn't let them perform to their highest, because you're not going to sit there and do that with a math. Oh, you can do it. Get that math problem right. You can do it. Right. So part of it is simply to demonstrate to adults that life can go on if I don't see that game.
David, one of the messages we send to our kids is that we're only there when they're performing. And I don't even think a well-intentioned parent means to do this, but it's this performance relationship. As long as you're doing well, then you get my hug or you get my affirmation. How do we avoid that formula as a parent? How do we make it about the spirit of the sport rather than the performance relationship? And that probably is a little indication about how we're parenting as well.
Unfortunately, yes, it does say something about us as parents, the way we sit in the stands. That's why one of the things that I've recommended is that at the start of the season, you determine with your spouse and the family what 1 or 2 games you're not going to attend, so that you can go have coffee with your spouse or go help somewhere or do something else like that. It's interesting that we will drop our children off at friends to play, or we'll drop them off at school, we'll drop them off at other things, and we let them go and then go back and pick them up. It was very fascinating. I ran a youth clinic for basketball on Saturdays when I was working at the high school. And very quickly, I had them come in from 9 to 12 every morning. I didn't divide them up into teams. Everybody got the same color T-shirt. The scoreboard was never on. I had the high school team coming. They taught them how to shoot. They taught them this. We played the game, but we made different teams every time. We'd play, you can shoot at any basket. We did all kinds of things. And interestingly enough, no parent ever stayed for the full 3 hours. And secondly, when the parents came back every time as they met the kids at the door, the question was, did you have fun? Huh. Now, how can we do that? And the presence, again, you have to know your child. And the children will say, I want you there. But I'm concerned that there will be a relationship that's built on performance. The worst thing I've ever seen as a high school athletic director was when parents came early in the season, and when their son or daughter did not play a lot, then they quit coming. That message said more to that child than parents will ever know.
Right. In the U.S. particularly, we do stress sports in what I would suggest is a crazy way. And as a Christian, we've got to balance these things out with spiritual development and what is important. And you can learn so many of those good spiritual attributes in sports. But are we out of kilter a bit at times, or does it depend on the parent and the coach? Or, as a culture, are we healthy when it comes to sports?
No, we're clearly not at a healthy point in my mind because of that. And that's the frustrating part about it, is there is so much valuable stuff going on in sports and so many lessons you can learn. Unfortunately, we've changed the priorities, and the priorities are now about the end result rather than the process and what can we learn from it. The purpose of sport should always be how to gain skills that can be used for later in life, whether you're 11 years old or whether you're 21 years old.
What are some of those benefits when you come out the other end and you've had maybe a good high school career, you maybe even played college, so now you graduate? What are those things that a typical student would have learned through sports?
Well, when I talk to business people around the country, they will tell you that they always look at the resume to find out whether they've played a sport or not, because they have learned how to sacrifice their own individual efforts to go together towards one. So you're working with a group of people on
a team sport
on a common goal. You've also learned what it takes to become the best you can be at what you're doing, which is what I would want for the physician who's going to operate on me or something like that. So you can learn you learn what your potential is. You learn what to do or how to handle a situation when you don't succeed. And you learn how to deal with someone else impeding your progress towards success. So you may work your tail off at bidding this job in the construction company, and somebody's going to undercut you. Well, when you were playing that sport, the referee also stepped in and made a call that wasn't quite right either. And so now you've learned how to deal with those things. I could go on and on with how many there are, but there are just so many that are there. But we forget about that as parents because we become so engrossed in it that the result is what we're after.
Now, you coached and were an AD and worked in athletics the last 30, 35 years. Give me that one story maybe that involves a parent that was just out of control. And let's change his name or her name to Jack or Jane. Don't say Jim Daly.
Well, I could probably do that one. Boy, that's a pretty difficult one. Although I think probably the one that takes the cake for me is one that is in the book, and that was when they came to me I think their son was an 8th grader, and they just said, we really like the school and we like the program, we like the coach, but I just want to let you know that our son's not going to play for the junior high team this year because he has some real potential, and we're gonna join the elite clubs, and we're gonna travel up and down the East Coast, and we're going to. So I'm sorry, we just can't participate in your program here.
Well, let's unpack that. Why is that a bad thing?
Number one, I would say the young man didn't have the physical capabilities
Okay.
of being where he wanted to get to, and I don't think he would. He wanted to play soccer. And his stature just would not have allowed him to do it. He was too small. He was fast, but he was too small. So his goal was Division I. I mean, that was the clear thing. We're going to play at Division I, and we're going to do that. So I think that was, again, the unpacking part of it is the fact that he missed out on all the developmental pieces that could have happened by playing for a school team. Because as soon as you move to the club level, you've taken away a lot of the team aspect and you've put it into an individual. The reason you're playing these elite club level stuff is to be noticed. It's all about the individual. You also don't have any practice. All you do is play. So you practice maybe once a week, and then you drive to northern Colorado to play in some elite soccer tournament. And so when kids are coming to me in college, they don't know what practice is about because it's all been based upon this tournament play and elite play and all of that. So they've missed the educational values of playing it at those developmental stages of age 12, 13, 14.
Margot, this can go all over the map, though, because parents can also feel guilty. I mean, I did not push my kids. I mean, this is embarrassing, but, I wanted to be mindful that I played sports. I love sports. but I didn't want to be that overbearing father that said, come on, little guy, you got to get out there or you're no good, kind of conveying that kind of value structure. So I remember the first time I signed Trent up to go to T-ball. He was probably 5, and we got out there. And I could just see that he had no interest at all. I mean, even the other kids were running, you know, every child out there ran to the right field to get the ball, even if you're in left field. And he stood there, and he didn't have any interest to chase the ball down. And that was okay. And I just said to him, would you rather go get a milkshake? And he was like, yeah, that would be great, Dad. He had no interest. And I'm sure that I'm going to hear from people hearing this saying, how could you do that? But there's guilt on every edge of youth sports for parents. You either do too much, you do too little, you're not doing it quite right, and you're looking at everybody else trying to figure it out. What do we do?
Yeah, well, I want to pause and say that's the win, because you noticed who your child was.
So you think that was the right thing?
I
mean,
do.
he was very excited to go get a milkshake.
Oh, no, gold star for you. But also, I played high school basketball, and so my daughter's a sophomore in high school. She's 6 feet tall. Her teammates want her to try out. The coaches want her to try out. And I really have to check myself because she's, not so sure. And she did end up trying out, made the team. And it required me letting go a little bit. She had a horrible season. She did not play again. And as a mom, I had to see who she was and release her to do the things that she really enjoyed. And so again and again, I think we need to notice what's inside of us so that we really can see who our child is and not be sort of forcing our own things. Just a note on the crazy parent, I talked to I'm sorry, I wasn't pointing at you, high school coach who had a student beg to be cut from the team during tryouts. And he said, what's up? And the student said, my parents want me to play, and I'm so exhausted. I've been doing it for years. And thankfully the coach said, that's a conversation you need to have with your parents. I'm not going to cut you. But some of these kids who've been playing since 10 months are burnt out. They're not even enjoying the sports.
Yeah.
When students start playing at age 8, when they're starting that young, by age 13, 70% of them have stopped playing.
They're burned out.
They don't enjoy it anymore.
Right, 70%.
70%.
That is an incredibly high number. Well, let's stick to that age group because that's the formative time. You're going out and all the kids, they're doing funny things as you watch them develop, like they're all running after the same ball when they're not playing the right position, etc. But that you talk in the book about the increased loss of age-appropriate play. So we take our kids, we want to make them super athletes, and we put them in this environment where it's practice, 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 and they're not doing the normal stuff like playing Superman and Batman out in the yard. Talk about the loss of the appropriate play.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I would say is the synopsis of the book, if I can put it into one thing, is what we have done in the world of youth sports. And again, when I talk about the youth sports, I want to make sure that we understand we're looking at that 10-month to sophomore year in high school. Okay,
Let's get rid of 10 months.
Okay,
it makes me cringe.
I know, I understand that. Okay, we'll stay at 5.
Crawl faster, crawl,
right,
crawl.
From 5 years old on up. There's certainly a place for kids to play the elite stuff when they get to the high school level in preparation for college. I have no deal with that at all. But when they come to that lower level, the problem really becomes in the fact that what we do as adults is we make it developmentally inappropriate because that's all we remember. That's all we understand. So if you look at the soccer amoeba that floats around every local field on a Saturday morning with mom and dad on the sidelines with the newspaper and a cup of coffee, you've got these people just running around chasing the ball, or as you said, left field to right field.
Right.
Well, they can't, they have not developed spatial awareness. Right. So why are we doing it? So we're putting them into these situations where they're going to fail.
Yeah.
And so when you look at that, if we could make it developmentally appropriate, and I don't want to go back to the good old days of the game in the backyard, but there's something to be learned from that.
Yeah.
How do we put them into situations where they learn to solve problems, where they learn to work together? But no, we're putting them in situations that they cognitively are not even able to comprehend. Yeah. And that's what really bothers me about the youth sports. So most of what we do is developmentally, in my mind, inappropriate.
The other aspect of this, and this can be tough, and I've experienced this. I don't want to be too open with this because I don't want to hurt my boys. But one of my boys played ball and he didn't start, and we would talk about that. But he would say, Dad, I just love being with the guys. I love being on the team. And I was the one going, yeah, but your goals need to be higher. I did exactly what I knew I shouldn't be doing. But, and it was, I'm over dramatizing, I hope.
We'll ask them.
Yeah, well, but how should a parent handle that when the kid's enjoying it? I mean, he may not or she may not be starting, but they love the camaraderie. It's an environment they're enjoying. They don't think they're going to be in the pros, but they're loving doing this in junior high or maybe even high school.
Yeah, you just described like the best possible situation, I think, for youth sports where kids are having fun and parents do dial it back a little bit. Any thoughts?
No, I think you're absolutely right. If you can let them, that's the dilemma of jumping in the van on the way home from the game and dad analyzing the technical aspect of the game and the strategy of the game. Your son is doing it for exactly the right reason. They are enjoying what they're doing, and that also is why you don't have to go to that game the next time, because they are doing fine, and he is gaining one of the best things that can happen. And even if your son isn't the starter, we aren't all starters when we get to professional life, are we? We're not all at the top of the rung. There's going to be different roles to play.
So even in that, you're learning.
Oh, absolutely, you're learning, because you're recognizing the fact that there's people that are better than you. You're learning that you have a role to play. And when you can understand what you're gaining from it, what he's gaining from it, just as what he said, I love being with the guys and it's fun.
Yeah.
We want to be giving parents tools to sort of navigate some of this. And in the minivan on the way home, parents need to dial it back, not analyze the game. One of the best things you can say to your kids is, I loved watching you play. Not if they were on the bench, but I
love
loved
seeing
watching
you out
play.
there.
I love seeing you out there.
Yeah.
Like, did you have fun with your friends? And really, in the van on the way home, let the child sort of move that conversation. They might not want to talk about the game, but don't need to analyze it. Just sort of notice what your child's experience was.
Be positive about it. Don't be overbearing. Now, most of the book, Overplayed, you're talking about myths that exist, and we've hit these almost indirectly. But one that caught my attention, because a lot of my friends, I'm serious, this is not us, but we do have friends that are very focused with their young men or women when it comes to single sport. And they may be 7th graders, 8th graders. And for me, when I played, I did football, basketball, and baseball. And I did it for 4 years of high school. And I loved it. It was diverse. It was fun. I couldn't hit a baseball to save my life, but I could field well. So I had to go through the humility of batting generally last, maybe even behind the pitcher. But that was a good thing for me. It made me laugh more at myself. But talk about this myth of the single sport for the young child.
Yeah, playing different sports each season is going to make your child a better player in that one sport maybe that they prefer or that they love.
That's the myth.
No, I'm saying playing multi-sports.
Yeah.
Playing different sports throughout the year are going to give them the mental skills, the physical skills to really excel if they do decide to specialize in one sport. But that doesn't happen when they're 5. It doesn't need to happen when they're 10. Maybe in high school they specialize, but it's so much better for their bodies, their minds, to be playing different sports throughout the year. And of youth sports injuries, 50% of those are overuse injuries. And that's what we're seeing in kids. Young adults who hear about this book are coming to me and saying, I wish my parent read that because it's the baseball player whose shoulder is shot for the rest of his life, or the gymnast who's living with injuries for the rest of her life because their parents pushed and pushed and pushed.
In a single sport context.
Exactly.
They did it year-round, league play, that
One
kind of
sport.
thing, rather than diverse sporting events.
Yeah, I think the issue with what's interesting is part of the reason I wrote the book was there aren't people within the athletic profession, if you will, saying this. And yet every college coach will tell you they prefer to recruit someone who has played multiple sports.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
Because of the diversity. My son at 6'9", a basketball player, would have been much better basketball player had he played volleyball. But he didn't. And so while the professional people the professional college coaches, et cetera, are saying, I want someone who's played multiple sports. We're down here at 11 years old saying, play this one all the way through.
Right, because
And
you got a natural ability.
yeah,
Whatever the reason.
or I understand it. If you want to be good at something, you have to do it a lot. But there is so much value in the cross training, physically, emotionally, mentally, to be playing those multiple sports. And this is what is very frustrating to me, is the fact that we're not sending that message out there. And we as parents know that too much of a good thing is often not a good thing. So why are we doing it with sports? I would never let my son eat a half gallon of ice cream at one sitting, okay? Because I know better. Well, we as parents know better, but it seems when it comes to sports, all of this rationality sort of escapes us.
Yeah.
You know, we've covered a lot of different things here about kids and sports. One thing that I don't think we've touched on quite yet is how much time it takes as a family if you've got multiple kids doing multiple sports. I knew one family, their school year and their summers, it was defined by which parent is going to which kids' games and how many of these can we make. I mean, they had several kids, so multiple things a night. There's a balance in there somewhere. How in the world do we find it?
Yeah, and you know, that's what we're seeing. We're seeing families that are stressed out, worn out. And so one of the things we encourage families to do is to sit down before the seasons and make some decisions. Start with what you value, what are our priorities, and then, you know, talk about how much money you want to spend on the sport, how much time, and then set some really good boundaries for your kids. Maybe it's one sport a season. If you have 6 kids, maybe it's, you know, you get to choose one sport each year, but have that conversation as a family and really listen to your children, because again, they might surprise you as they describe what it is that they would prefer and what they would like to do.
The difficult part for parents in this is to take that risk, because everybody else is playing multiple sports and multiple seasons, and the coach will tell you, you have to do this if you're going to keep getting better. The reality is, if they would go play something else, or even if they'd take time off and go to the soup kitchen with their family, they would gain more as a whole person. But the risk a parent is taking by not signing them up for that is something they have a really hard time overcoming, but yet that's the reality that's there. And so when you go back to it, this is counterintuitive type stuff. The scriptures also say, don't be conformed to the patterns of the world, be transformed by the renewing of your minds, which says we could think about this in a very different way. But the risk is pretty great. I understand the risk for parents to say, we're not going to play all of these multiple sports, because the fear is either they're going to lose interest or they're going to fall way behind when they turn around and come. My counsel is, if your son or daughter is good at the sport, they're going to find a place to play.
Right.
The coach's ego is going to have them in there if they can help them to win. And if they lose out on the skill development to someone else, so be it. It's not the end of the world.
Right.
They're 12 years old. They're going to find something else to do.
And that's the point. You can overinvest as a parent and overinvest in the wrong thing.
Well, they're people a lot longer than they're athletes. So let's figure out how to make people.
Personally? Why is he looking at me?
You're a people, Jim.
But we lose sight of that fact, that it's really about, I mean, I care more about who my son is now at 35 than I did when he was playing basketball.
Have the long
So,
view.
yeah.
We have scratched the surface here, but there's more to talk about, more myths in your book, Overplayed. And I think parents, again, this is right behind our faith development, is what's happening with sports in our household. John, when you mentioned that question about having kids going in, you know, hockey and soccer and football and tennis, I mean, that would just drive, you don't have enough parent space to get the kids to all those activities. So I can feel for that family. And we want to come back next time and address some of those other issues.
Hey, I'm John Fuller, and thanks for watching. Get more info about Focus over here and more from our guests over there, and be sure to subscribe to our channel as well.